Okay. Three companies have the following results during the recent period: net profit margin, total asset turnover, and total assets over equity. Derive for each company the return on equity. Okay. So, colleagues, first things first, we have to remember the definitions here. Okay. So, we can say return on equity, how much profit the company is generating from the owner's money. That's what we can say return on equity. Okay. For every one quarter of equity invested by shareholders, how much profit does the company produce? Okay, that's return on equity. Okay, how much profit are we generating from the owner's money, which is the equity? A higher return on equity, the better. A lower return on equity, the worse. Okay, because you want to be earning more profit from the shareholders' money. Because it shows you're utilizing the shareholders' money well. It's bringing you profits. Okay. Then this net profit margin, what it means, okay? It's just telling you how much net profit you keep for every one quarter of sales or for every 100 quarter of sales. Okay. Net profit margin, it tells us what percent of sales revenue is net profit. Okay. You think of your sales revenue as a big cake. Okay. So you want to find out what slice of that cake is the net profit. That's what net profit margin is. What percent of sales revenue is net profit? Or for every one kwacha you make in sales, how much net profit do you get? If you don't like one kwacha, you can say for every 100 kwacha you make in sales, how much is net profit? Okay. So for company K, for every one kwacha they make in sales, the net profit is 4 ngwe. For company L, for every one kwacha they make in sales, their net profit is 6 ngwe. For company M, for every one kwacha they make in sales, 10 ngwe is their net profit. So in terms of net profit margin, we can see company M is doing the best. Okay. For every sale they are making, they are keeping more net profit. Okay. Asset turnover is just telling you how much sales you're generating from your assets. Okay. It tells you how much revenue a company earns for every one quarter invested in assets. Okay. How much sales are we generating from our assets? Okay. How well your assets are generating you sales in simple words. Okay. So for company K, okay, for every one quarter they've invested in their assets, the assets are generating them 2 quarter 20 ngwe in sales. Company L, for every one quarter they've invested in their assets, okay, the assets are generating them 2 quarter in sales. For company M, for every one quarter they've invested in their assets, okay, they're earning 1 quarter 14 ngwe in sales. So company K, his assets are generating more sales than these other companies, okay? Because for every one kwacha that is invested in their assets, they're getting 2 kwacha 20 ngwe in sales. So even this for this ratio, a higher number, the better. It means your assets are generating you more sales. Okay, so company K is doing better in this thing. Then this total assets over equity. You just want to find out how much of your assets are financed by the shareholders' money. Okay. Total assets over equity, also known as the equity multiplier. Okay. For every 1 quarter of equity, how much do we have in assets? Okay, so it's basically you're talking about getting assets from the shareholders' money. Okay, yes. So for company K, for every 1 quarter in equity, they have 2 quarter 14 go in assets. Company L, for every 1 quarter of equity that they have 2 quarter 20 go in assets. Company M, for every 1 quarter of equity, they have 1 quarter 50 go in assets. Okay. So company K has got more assets from the shareholders' money. Okay, because for every 1 quarter of equity they have 2 quarter 14 way in terms of assets. All right. Yes. So they're asking us to derive for each company the return on equity. So the return on equity is the net profit margin multiplied by the asset turnover multiplied by the equity multiplier, which is the total assets over equity. Okay. So for each company, we're just going to multiply these three figures. Company K 0.4 multiplied by 2.2 multiplied by 2.4. Company L 0.606 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2.2. Same for company M. Okay. So company K, its return on equity is 21 and well. Okay. So for every 1 quarter of the shareholders' money, okay, they're earning 26 ngwe profit. Okay. I mean 21 ngwe profit. Company L, return on equity is 0.264. Okay. So it means it earns 26 ngwe in profit for every 1 quarter of the shareholders' money. Okay, remember return on equity, how much profit you're getting from the shareholders' money. Company M 0.21 or so, right? 0.21. So that's how much profit they're getting for every 1 quarter of the shareholders' money. Okay, so as we can see, company L is doing the best. Okay, it is earning 26 ngwe of profit for every 1 quarter of the shareholders' money. Yes. Any questions? Okay, part B. Given the following earnings and dividends, compute the sustainable growth rate for each firm. So this sustainable growth rate is how the rate at which the company can grow if they just use the money from their profits, basically. Okay. No using debt or any equity, you're just using money from your profits. How fast can your company grow? Okay, so they've given us earnings per share. Remember, earnings per share, if all the profit the company makes is given to shareholders, this is how much each shareholder gets from the overall profit from the company. Okay. Company just decides to pay, okay, we're not going to keep any money. All this profit we have, excluding the preference share dividends, means any profit that we have, we're going to give it all to the shareholders. That's what the earnings per share is. The company gives out all its profit, how much each shareholder gets. Then dividend per share is how much dividends each shareholder gets. Okay. So company M has a higher earnings per share. Okay. Then company K has a higher dividend per share. Okay. So as an investor, you will see, okay, because earnings per share, it's rare that the company will give out all of its profit to its shareholders. Okay. It's more of a theoretical value. But these dividends per share, these are the dividends that have been paid. You see, company K is paying better, higher dividends. So this sustainable growth rate, this is how we get it. Okay. The retention ratio multiplied by the return on equity. Okay. Retention ratio multiplied by return on equity. Okay. Remember what is the retention ratio? How much of the profit the company keeps for itself. Okay. That's the retention ratio. When the company has gets its profit, remember some has to be kept, some has to be given as dividends. And remember the dividend payout ratio is just how much of the total profit has been paid out as dividends. So the retention ratio, colleagues, all right, this is the formula. It's 1 minus dividend per share over earnings per share. All right. We already have our returns on equity, so we just need to get each company's retention ratio. Okay. So for company K, okay, we're going to say here earnings per share over dividend per share, 1 minus earnings per share over dividend per share. Right. The dividend per share is 1.25, earnings per share is 2.75. Okay. So 1.25 divided by 2.75 gets 0.4545. 1 minus 0.4545 is 0.5455, which is 54.55%, which is telling us that when company K makes its profit, it keeps 54%, or round, if we round off to just 55%. Yes, when company K makes its profit, it keeps 55% of that profit. Okay. Then the remaining 45% is paid out as dividends. That's what this retention ratio is saying. So the sustainable growth rate, all right, it's our return on equity. Company K's return on equity, remember it was 0.21 here, 0.21 multiplied by the retention ratio 0.5455. So 0.21 multiplied by 0.5455, you get 0.1152, which is 11.52%. Okay. So this company, if it's just using its profits only, it can grow by 11.52% per year. Just using only its profits, it can grow by that rate per year. Any questions before we go to company L? Company L's retention ratio, remember dividend per share over earnings per share. So 1 divided by 3, you get 0.3333. Okay. 1 minus 0.33, that is 0.667, which is 66.67%. That's the retention ratio. Meaning when company L makes its profit, it keeps 67% of it. The remaining 33% goes to be paid out as dividends. I forgot to mention one thing. This dividend per share over earnings per share. This is the dividend payout ratio. Okay, colleagues. This dividend per share over earnings per share. This is the dividend payout ratio. This is how much is paid as dividends from the profit. Okay. So as you can see for company L, it pays out 33% of its profit as dividends and keeps 67% as profit. Okay. Company K, It was keeping 45% as it was paying out for 5% of its profit as dividend, and it was keeping 55% of the profit. Okay. Similarly with company. Oh, have we tabulated the sustainable growth rate? Sustainable growth rate for company L. Okay, it's our return on equity. Remember, return on equity for this company was 0.264, and the retention ratio is 0.667. So 0.264 multiplied by 0.667, you get 0.176 or 17.6%. Okay. So this company, if it uses its profits only, it can grow by 17.6% per year. Okay, colleagues. So notice one thing, colleagues. All right. The more the company retains of profit, the higher the sustainable growth rate. Okay. Now, if you're paying out dividends and keeping less profits, your sustainable growth rate would drop. And finally, company M, 1 minus the dividend payout ratio, which is the dividend per share divided by earnings per share, which gives us 0.22, which tells us company M pays out 22% of its money as dividends. All right. 1 minus 0.22, you get 0.778. Okay, so the company keeps 77% of its profit. Okay, 77% of its profit. And the sustainable growth rate, remember, return on equity 21 ngwe multiplied by 0.778, which is the retention ratio, you get 16.33%. Okay, so company M, if it uses its profits only, it can grow at the rate of 16.33% per year. Okay. So now I want us to notice also something. Okay. Remember, company L, let's see, company L pays out 33%. This one pays 22%. Okay. So company L pays more dividends than company M. Okay. Company M pays 22%. Okay. But company L pays 33%. But you notice the sustainable growth rate is higher for L than for M, despite L paying more of the dividends. So also another factor that affects the sustainable growth rate is also the return on equity. Okay. A high return on equity and a high retention ratio, a high sustainable growth rate. Okay. Then if the retention ratio is greater than the return of equity, you have a higher sustainable growth rate, and vice versa. So these two factors basically, the more they increase, your sustainable growth rate increases. The more they decrease, your sustainable growth rate drops. Yes. Any questions, colleagues? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Here, madam. Madam, every value I'm using is given. Okay. Then the next question. No, that's what we're finding. That's what we're calculating. Yes. Remember, SGR is ROE multiplied by retention ratio. So here basically what we're doing is we're just tabulating the retention ratios, then multiplying by the returns on equity to get the sustainable growth rate. Is that okay, madam? All right. Any